Well, welcome back to Contrastly. My name is Simon Plant, and today we're going to look at creative grain. So I'm using the word grain today, which is a bit of a throwback from my film days. It's actually noise. It's the same thing, grain and noise, but noise obviously the digital equivalent. And we always seem to associate noise or grain as being something that's undesired in our images, and there's lots of filters and stuff we can do to try and avoid that. But sometimes it's quite nice to have a bit of noise in our images. It can add a real nice kind of textured, painterly effect to our images. And there's some guys out there, and I'll give you their names, some photographers who do this and use noise and grain to great effect. So I thought we'd have a little play around today and show you what can be done. So in front of us is an image that I shot of my daughters at a ballet class. I've done a little bit of work on this already, but this is a really good image to put some grain onto. These techniques are going to work best with images shot on a slightly longer lens. You could try it on wide angles, but in general terms, you need that kind of compressed look to the pictures, and you only get that with sort of standard to longer lenses. So generally, I would advise if you're going to try this, it'll work better on those lenses. Okay, so there's a couple of ways we can do this. Now, I'm going to make an assumption that most of you out there work in 8-bit. Now, if you don't know what I'm on about, then you can go and perhaps Google that. But up here under image mode, there's some options: 8-bit per channel, 16-bit per channel, and 32-bit. Very rarely you'll be in 32 bits, but I normally work in 16 bits because I do a lot of retouching and a lot of heavy lifting within Photoshop, and it just makes sure that I don't deteriorate the images too much when working on them. But most people like yourselves possibly work in 8-bit, so this way works fine in 8-bit, but it won't work in 16-bit. So hopefully you understand what I'm going on about. So let's presume we're working in 8-bit. I'm going to duplicate my background layer, press Command Control J. I'm going to right click. I'm going to turn this into a smart object just because we might want to come to and fro adjusting the settings. We're now going to go to Filter, and we're going to go to where is it? Filter Gallery. Okay, and there's an option under the Texture tab. There's an option for grain. Okay, and there's different types of grain in here. I've got this one on soft at the moment. There's regular. There's a thing called sprinkles, which I can't imagine anybody using that unless you've got a specific reason for it. Clumped, contrasty, etc., and large. So there's quite a few presets in here. I find that the soft option on this image works quite well. Now, it's in you've got the intensity and a contrast slider here. It will depend on your image how contrasty it already is to start off with. But again, we can adjust these and come back into it. I would suggest these type of images generally look better in slightly flatter light. So I would just bring the contrast down a little bit, like so. Intensity, again, we can come back and adjust this. So let's go for somewhere like 65 on this one. Click OK. And ideally, you're not going to really notice so much these images unless they're very large on a website. They're going to get the benefit when they're printed. So let's just zoom in. I'm going to zoom in to 100% on the girls' faces to have a look at what we've added. Okay, so there's before with no noise added, and bear in mind this image was shot at quite a high ISO anyway because it was quite a dimly lit room, so there's already a little bit of noise already in the image. So here's the with the grain added, so you can make a decision now what you want to do, whether you want to drop it off or keep it around there. Okay. The other thing we can do, which again I'm going back to kind of the film days, this digital noise is quite sharp. You may want to come in and go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and sometimes adding a sort of a very small amount of blurring, say half a pixel, like so, can help just make it look less digital if that's what you want to do. There's before, and there's after. Okay, with the blurring applied, so it's just blurring that noise very slightly. I actually want to keep it as is, so I'm going to take that filter off there. So there's before, there's after. So that's the first start. There's other things we can do. We can perhaps reduce some of the effects, which I think we will do. So I don't mind it quite strong in the shadow areas and midtones, but maybe up here want to back off a little bit. One way of doing that is we can double click on the side of the layer here and bring up the layer styles, and we can Alt Option click on the highlight slider here to split it. And if you remember rightly from watching any of my other videos, that actually controls the transition. So what I'm doing at the moment, I'm bringing this slider down. If you watch on the girls' faces now, you'll see that the noise will gradually, that's gone too far, come out from there. It's still quite heavy over in this area by her arm, but it's taking it off the faces a little bit, okay? And obviously if I bring this over as well, the transition is much more harsh, and you can see it's kind of quite abrupt. So this is why we split that that little triangle to make it smooth. So that's helping a little bit. Just, you know, add the noise to the shadow areas, but keep it off the faces a little bit so we can see a bit more detail. To take that one step further, the girl in the background here, my eldest daughter, is in a little bit more shadow, and therefore she's picking up more of the noise. The other thing we can do is to use a filter here, the layer mask, or add our own, which we'll do. We'll add a layer mask here. We can then get a paintbrush. I'm going to drop the flow down to about 5%. I'm not going to paint with black. I'm going to paint with like a mid-tone grey or slightly lighter. What that does, it means I'm going to very slowly build the effect up. I'm going to take the effect of the filter away from her face. So I'm just going to paint very gently here. You're probably thinking it's not doing anything, but if I Alt Option click on the mask, you'll see that's my mask there. So it is really faint. If I painted with black, even though we've got a flow of 5%, it would just tailor off that bit quicker, which is fine if you've got a steady hand. But sometimes I prefer to use this method. So I'm not painting with a full black. I'm just painting with a lighter tone. So there's before. So that's made quite a big difference there. Still grain in there, but it's that little bit more subtle again, so we can see her face a bit better. There's before, there's after. Okay, so let's just zoom out a little bit. So we've got this lovely grain around the edges here, but the faces of the girls are that little bit more smoothed out. I think actually that's probably a little bit too much on her face, so I'm going to now get a paintbrush again and just paint with white to bring some of that back in. I think it's smoothed out too much. Okay, it wants to match, you know, fairly well with this one, the foreground. Okay, so there's before, there's after. So that's just added a little bit of ambience and grittiness and maybe romance. I don't know if that's the right word, but I love that. And as I said, it's going to be more apparent when you come to print the image. So viewing at 100%, you can really see what's happening in the image. Oops, I don't know what's going on there. Okay, so there's before, there's after. So that's just one way to add a little bit of creative grain to your images. I hope you enjoyed this short video, and I hope to catch you on the next one. Cheers for watching.